When I hear the simplicity of that beautiful Christmas classic, I think of another classic, if it's appropriate to describe a person as being a classic. A man who was quiet simplicity personified, Bob Benson. He could see all sides of life and capture its very essence in his writings. Let me read you one of Bob's word pictures. Actually, it's more than a picture, it's a portrait, and I just hope I can describe it half as well as he would have. In early November last year, while Peg and I were taking a trip together, we worked out our budget for Christmas. We listed all those to whom we wanted to give presents and how much we thought we could spend for them. We could have done a little better all the way around, I guess, but we also decided to spend some money on moments. I'm not sure that I even know how to describe a moment when it comes. Most of the time they come unexpectedly anyway. I'm not sure I know how to define it when it happens, but I know it when it does. Of course, we've been around long enough to know that money won't necessarily buy a moment. You've been places, haven't you, where they've said that something was going to happen and you paid your money and went and nothing did? But we were determined to decorate the walls, dim the lights, light the candles, ring the bells, and sing the carols so that if a moment decided it wanted to happen to us or among us, it would sure know that it was welcome. Our family has a way of rating experiences together. One of the gauges of our pleasure was discovered when someone noticed that Peggy snorted when she was really tickled at something. Since that time, the highest rating a joke can get at our house is a 3 snorter. They may come when we all are laughing or teasing, and they've been known to slip in along with someone's illness or struggle. The way we seem to recognize a moment at our house is that it's usually accompanied by lumps in our throats and tears in our eyes. And all of a sudden, we're standing in the midst of a moment. On Christmas Eve, the larger family gathered at our house to eat dinner and exchange gifts. When the food was ready and it was time to eat, we went into the living room and stood in a circle around the creche. A solitary candle flickered light across the manger and the baby. And with our arms around each other, we sang, "Oh, come let us adore him, Christ the Lord." I bowed my head and, as best I could, began to lift our thankfulness and praise for all that had come to us because he had come into the world in a manger, for family, for belonging, for grandparents and for grandchildren, and our son Robert added, and for brothers and sisters. The amen was pronounced, and as we started for the dining room, it was easy enough to see, even through blurry eyes, that we had just experienced a moment. There was dinner with all the trimmings, macaroni and cheese like only Grandmother Seiler can make, Bo's green beans and her squash casserole, Jetta's pies and cheesecake, and Peg's turkey and dressing with rolls. When we had eaten far more than we should have, and the kitchen was clean and the dishes were put away, we went into the den by the fire and took our places to open the piles of presents beneath the tree. When the gifts were all opened and the wrapping paper and ribbon had been cleaned up, Peg suggested that I read Truman Capote's A Christmas Memory to them all. So I reached under my chair and pulled it out and began. It's a beautiful, moving story about a Christmas when Truman was 7 and living with his Aunt Sook, who was in her 60s. It's a long-ago moment from his life, made all the more poignant when you consider the strange directions in which he was finally taken by his fame and riches. His parents were divorced, and neither wanted little Truman, so he was sent to live with some elderly relatives, and this old aunt was his best friend and companion. By the time I got to Christmas Day, when he and the old lady were flying the kites they had made for each other, our den was laden with warmth and feeling. They had made the kites because they spent all their money making and mailing fruitcakes to others. I read the things she said to him. Quote, "I've always thought a body would have to be sick and dying before they saw the Lord. And I imagined that when he came, it would be like looking at the Baptist window, pretty as colored glass with the sun pouring through, such a shine you don't know it's getting dark. And it's been a comfort to think of that shine taking away all the spooky feeling. But I'll wager it never happens. I'll wager at the very end, a body realizes that the Lord has already shown himself, that things as they are, just what they've always been, was seeing him. As for me, I could leave the world with today in my eyes." End quote. It was quiet enough to hear the tears gently falling from our cheeks onto our Christmas finery. Too soon it was time for coats and hats and gloves and carry out to the cars, and then farewells. We were all standing in the kitchen saying our last goodbyes when Peg saw something on the countertop some friends had sent to us a few weeks before. It was an Irma Bombeck column entitled, "One of These Days." Peg began to read Irma's words. "One of these days you'll shout, 'Why don't you kids grow up and act your age?' And they will. Only a voice crying, 'Why don't you grow up?' And the silence echoing, 'I did.'" There was enough stuff in the middle about no more nights in a vaporizer tent and no more carpools and PTA and wet knotted shoestrings and tight boots to cause all 4 generations in my kitchen to stand unabashedly touched. And we all exclaimed almost together, "What a Christmas celebration." It's been a 3 sniffler. Maybe that's not a record, but it's a good average. The socks will wear out, and the ties will get spots on them, and the sweaters will stretch out of shape. But the moments are tucked away in our memories for all time and will only improve with age. They'll be brighter and happier every time we take them out to enjoy and celebrate. I'm a believer in moments.